Have you ever had that feeling, that sort of background hum of unease, maybe? Like the world around you, or let's be honest, maybe even you yourself, is just gliding along, following the easiest path.
Mm.
That actually thinking deeply, questioning things, forming your own ideas, or even just grappling with something complicated,
Hmm.
that it's somehow become secondary.
Yeah, almost like a luxury we can't afford anymore.
Exactly. So today we're doing a depth dive. It might get a bit uncomfortable, but it feels really essential. We're looking into why it seems like nobody really thinks anymore and what that's actually costing us.
It's a huge topic.
It is. You want to try and uncover some of the hidden forces that have kind of quietly reshaped how we process everything. Okay, let's unpack this.
What's fascinating here, I think, is first nailing down what we even mean by thinking in this discussion. Because it's definitely not just the everyday meaning of the word.
Right, not just having thoughts.
Precisely. It's not simply about being smart or having a high IQ. And it's not just memorizing facts or being able to recall information quickly. That's recall, not necessarily thinking.
Okay.
The kind of thinking we're diving into today, well, it's multifaceted. It involves critical thinking, that rigorous process of really evaluating information, spotting biases, questioning assumptions.
Digging underneath the surface.
Exactly. And then forming your own well-reasoned judgments. It also includes deep analysis, being able to take complex issues apart, understand how the pieces fit together, see the patterns.
Connecting the dots.
Yes. And, crucially, independent reasoning. The ability to actually forge your own conclusions based on logic and evidence, not just, echoing what everyone else is saying or what you read somewhere.
Which feels rarer these days.
It can feel that way.
Mm.
And finally, there's synthesis, which isn't just mashing info together. It's seeing something new emerge when you combine different ideas.
Yeah.
Like understanding the whole flavor profile of a dish, not just listing the ingredients.
That's a great analogy.
It's really about the active, sometimes difficult process of engaging with information. It's a conscious, deliberate journey your mind takes, not just passively consuming stuff.
Okay, that distinction is really clear and really important. So the big mission for us today is figuring out why. Why as a society have we apparently lost some of this capacity for deep, independent thought?
And what are the consequences? What's the actual impact?
Exactly. What are we losing because of it? So we're going on this journey, not just to complain about it, honestly, but to really try and understand the roots, the causes, the effects. Hopefully we can offer you some clarity, maybe a few surprises, and maybe even a little bit of empowerment to reclaim that thinking space.
Because it is reclaimable.
Let's start with maybe the most obvious suspect, the one we bump into constantly. This overwhelming rise of convenience, of shortcuts, especially the ones driven by technology and, let's face it, social media culture.
It's everywhere.
You see it, you probably live it every single day, right? This expectation of instant information, instant answers for anything, anytime.
No waiting.
The digital age, particularly social media platforms, AI tools now, it feels like they've built this culture where convenience is just the ultimate priority. It's valued way more than the often messy, difficult effort of actually thinking something through.
The path of least resistance.
Totally. We're chasing instant gratification, aren't we? The quick hit of a like, the endless scroll, the super fast search result that just pops up. I mean, think about your own habits, honestly. When you need an answer, what's the first move? Is it digging into multiple sources? Or is it straight to Google or an AI, expecting that neat, packaged answer that feels final?
Yeah, it's almost automatic for most people now. No further inquiry needed, it seems.
That's become the default, hasn't it? Almost unconscious.
And this environment, it's not just sitting there passively. It's actively rewiring our brains, often without us even noticing it's happening.
How so?
Well, the constant stimulation, the novelty, the easy answers, it's actually diminishing our ability for sustained attention, for that deep cognitive processing that real thinking requires.
It's like our attention spans are shrinking.
In a way, yes. But it's also about the depth. Our brains are fundamentally wired to conserve energy. Thinking hard uses up glucose and oxygen. It's metabolically expensive.
Right.
So if there's a shortcut, a neural pathway that gets an answer faster with less effort, the brain naturally prefers that. That's why a quick search result literally feels better sometimes than sitting and wrestling with a problem for half an hour. It uses less energy.
That makes a scary amount of sense.
So why spend all that mental energy if a shortcut is right there? And AI, while incredibly powerful, plays into this too. It can do some of the analytical heavy lifting, the summarizing, the synthesis.
Which sounds great initially.
It can be. But it can also inadvertently reduce the need for us to practice those skills ourselves. And like any skill, if you don't use it,
You lose it, or it weakens.
exactly. It's subtle. It's not just AI doing the work. It's that our own mental approach shifts. Maybe we get really good at writing prompts for the AI, but less good at doing the deep internal investigation and synthesis ourselves.
So we become prompt engineers instead of deep thinkers.
Potentially, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains optimize for the new tool. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the long-term impact. If whole generations get less practice wrestling with messy, ambiguous information because tools give quick, often simplified answers, what does that do to our collective problem-solving ability down the line?
That's a big question, and it leads right into this weird paradox, doesn't it? We have more information available than ever before in history, like unimaginable amounts.
Instantly accessible.
Right. But counterintuitively, having all that access seems to have removed the perceived need to actually analyze it deeply or engage with it critically.
Information overload leading to cognitive underload.
Exactly. That's the trap of surface-level thinking. We're just bombarded constantly with headlines, summaries, short videos, tweets.
Sound bites.
Sound bites. It's like that huge buffet analogy I was thinking about. You can wander around, taste hundreds of little things, sample everything.
Bit of this, a bit of that.
Yeah. But you never really sit down and savor one dish. You never understand its ingredients, how it was made, its history. You get a tiny taste of everything, but zero deep appreciation for anything.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And the sheer volume of information, it actually triggers a kind of defensive mechanism in our brains.
How do you mean?
Faced with this constant flood, our cognitive systems often just default to shallow processing, skimming, scanning. It's less effortful than diving deep into every single thing, which would be impossible anyway.
So it's a survival strategy in a way.
In a way, yes. Our brains opt for efficiency. But the consequence is we often just accept information at face value. We don't pause to ask, okay, where did this come from? What's the potential bias here? What are they not saying?
The underlying assumptions.
Exactly. And again, this isn't about people being unintelligent. It's about a widespread lack of practice in these analytical processes. They're just not being exercised regularly.
Like sharing an article based only on the headline.
That's the classic example. You see it constantly. It perfectly demonstrates that superficial level of engagement. The real paradox, as some of our sources suggest, is that the sheer volume makes us crave simplicity. Our overwhelmed brains actively look for the easiest, most digestible answer, even if it's flawed or incomplete.
It's not laziness, it's overload defense.
Precisely. But it's a vulnerability. And if we connect this back, it's not just what we consume, it's how we consume it. And that how is actively reshaping our cognitive habits, training us, in effect, to be shallow processors.
It is worryingly easy to slip into that, isn't it? I mean, I catch myself doing it all the time. That sort of unconscious drift. You're just scrolling, maybe feeling a bit bored or unfocused, or you have a simple question pop into your head and bang, reflexively, you grab your phone, type it into a search bar.
Without even pausing to think if you might know it already.
Exactly, or considering different angles, or questioning the first source that pops up. We all have those moments, those sort of thoughtless actions where convenience just wins. And, I want to be clear, this isn't about judging anyone. It's just observing this pattern that's become so normal, so pervasive.
It feels like the default setting now.
It really does.
And that's the key, isn't it? These individual moments, these micro behaviors, they aren't just isolated blips. They reflect universal human tendencies, sure. But when millions of people do them constantly, they add up. They aggregate into these huge societal shifts.
The sum is greater than the parts.
Definitely. And the really insidious thing about convenience is how gradual it is. It's a slippery slope. Every time we take the cognitive shortcut, every time we accept the surface answer without digging deeper, we're subtly eroding those critical faculties. It's like a muscle weakening from lack of use. But we don't even notice it happening until maybe we really need it and find it's not as strong.
A gradual diminishment.
Exactly. So, okay, we've seen how this convenience culture is shaping our day-to-day habits. But what about the place where we're supposed to learn how to think? What about education? How has that system potentially contributed to this?
Ah, yes, the education piece. Because this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive. Education, which you'd think exists precisely to foster critical thinking, Well, it might actually be inadvertently hindering it in some ways.
How so?
Well, our sources point to some pretty significant shifts in traditional education over the years. There seems to have been this relentless drive towards easily measurable outcomes.
Standardized testing comes to mind.
Absolutely. Standardized tests, performance metrics. There's often a huge emphasis on rote memorization and just being able to recall facts accurately. The focus seems to have shifted in many places from the how of thinking, the exploration, the inquiry, the struggle with ideas to just the what.
Just accumulating facts.
Yeah, like building an inventory of knowledge rather than developing the dynamic, sometimes messy skill of knowing and understanding.
And the reasons for those shifts are complex, of course. Policy decisions, funding pressures, accountability measures.
Right. Often well-intentioned.
Often, yes. But the cumulative impact is pretty clear. When the main goal becomes learning what to think, specific facts, dates, formulas, rather than how to think, how to analyze, problem solve, synthesize well, you risk producing generations who are great at recall.
Can ace the test.
Exactly. But might be less equipped for deeper understanding, original thought, or tackling problems that aren't in the textbook. Standardized testing, aiming for accountability, can unintentionally narrow the curriculum.
Teaching to the test.
It incentivizes teaching to the test, and tests, by their nature, often favor clear-cut answers over nuanced arguments, creative solutions, or open-ended exploration. So the whole system can subtly become optimized for regurgitation, not necessarily for genuine, adaptable understanding or innovation.
Which has huge implications down the line.
Huge, especially for fields that demand abstract thinking, complex problem solving, dealing with ambiguity. If students aren't getting that mental gym time to practice those skills, where will they develop them? They might excel at picking the right answer from a list, but struggle when they have to define the problem and invent the possible answers.
And we see the result, don't we? This sort of generation gap in thinking, as some sources call it. You have people who are incredibly competent at following instructions, at recalling information, performing really well on structured tasks.
They can master existing systems very efficiently.
For sure. But then put them in a situation that requires genuine innovation or independent thought in the face of uncertainty, or navigating a messy, ill-defined problem with no clear answer.
And they might struggle.
Right. Think about the difference between a student who can list every battle in a war versus one who can analyze the complex, conflicting causes of that war from multiple perspectives and maybe even propose ways such conflicts could be avoided. It's a different skill set.
Entirely different. And again, it's crucial to stress this isn't about intelligence. It's a systemic outcome. It highlights that critical difference between just having knowledge, collecting facts, and having the wisdom or the skill to apply that knowledge creatively and critically.
Knowing stuff versus knowing what to do with it.
Precisely. Having a head full of facts doesn't automatically mean you can use them to solve a new problem or adapt to a changing situation. If you haven't practiced critical thinking, you're likely less adaptable. Which really makes you question, what is the ultimate purpose of education, if not to cultivate exactly those independent, adaptable thinkers? People who can navigate the future, not just recite the past.
It's a fundamental question.
And it's not a flaw of the individuals, it's a reflection of the system's priorities.
Okay, to really bring this home and maybe challenge everyone listening, including us, let me throw out this question that kept cropping up in the research. When was the last time you honestly had to think deeply about something for, say, more than 15 minutes without any interruption?
The 15-minute rule.
Yeah. Just pause and think about it. A sustained period of focused thought. No phone buzz, no quick Google search, no mental drift to your email inbox. Just you and the problem or the idea.
A lot harder than it sounds.
It's incredibly hard. I know for me, just last week, I was trying to plan out this complex project, and my immediate instinct, honestly, open a new browser tab, search for project planning templates, best practices.
Look for an existing structure.
You're right. Instead of just sitting with the unique aspects of this project and thinking it through from the ground up, I had to consciously close the browser, put my phone face down, and just think. And it felt surprisingly effortful, which really underlined that 15-minute challenge point.
It's a simple question, but it reveals so much. Our brain's ability to sustain focus, it really is like a muscle. It needs regular, strenuous workouts to stay strong.
And we're not giving it those workouts.
Increasingly, no. The difficulty many of us face with that 15-minute challenge is a direct result of the constant distractions and that convenience culture we talked about. Short bursts of attention are fine for some things, scanning social media, quick emails.
Skimming headlines.
Skimming headlines, yes, but they're completely insufficient for complex problem solving, for real creativity, for synthesizing different pieces of information, for grappling with nuance. Those things demand prolonged, uninterrupted focus,
The very thing our environment seems designed to prevent.
almost actively discourage sometimes. And this isn't just about our personal habits or education.
Sure.
Society itself throws up some powerful, often invisible barriers to independent thought.
That's a really key transition because beyond our individual tech habits and maybe the way we were schooled, there are these big social and psychological currents that pull us away from thinking for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the biggest ones has to be groupthink, right?
Classic example. It's a well-studied psychological phenomenon. Basically, the desire for harmony or conformity within a group becomes so strong that it overrides a realistic, critical look at alternatives.
Fitting in becomes more important than being right or thinking clearly.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Society's pressure to conform, whether it's in a small team meeting or a whole cultural movement, can effectively silence unique opinions. It can suppress original thoughts, stop critical insights from ever being voiced, even if those insights are vital.
Why does that happen so easily?
It taps into our fundamental human need to belong. Nobody wants to be the outsider, the troublemaker, so people might self-censor. They hold back their doubts or criticisms to avoid conflict, to maintain social standing,
Even if they privately disagree.
even if they privately have serious reservations. This leads to that dangerous illusion of unanimity. Everyone thinks everyone else agrees, so they keep quiet. And sometimes you even get mind guards in a group. Yeah, people who actively shield the group from dissenting information or viewpoints, trying to protect the consensus. Think of a manager who dismisses concerns from their team, or a political group that actively suppresses internal dissent. They're guarding the group's shared view, however flawed it might be.
You see it in boardrooms making bad calls, political movements shutting down debate.
Exactly. And the result is that critical perspectives get lost, vital information is ignored, and poor, sometimes catastrophic decisions become almost inevitable because the group never truly engaged in rigorous, open thinking.
And our digital lives seem to amplify this, don't they? With echo chambers and confirmation bias.
Hugely. Many of us are living inside these digital echo chambers, maybe without even fully grasping it.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, online platforms, their algorithms are designed to show us more of what we already like, what we already agree with, based on our clicks, our shares, our history.
To keep us engaged.
To keep us engaged, exactly. So our feeds become these self-reinforcing bubbles. We mostly see content from people who think like us, sources that confirm our existing beliefs. It just echoes our own worldview back at us, over and over.
Which feels comfortable, I guess.
It feels comfortable, but it directly feeds into confirmation bias, which is our natural tendency anyway. We all tend to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe. And we tend to discount or ignore stuff that challenges us.
We look for evidence that proves us right.
We do. And echo chambers make that incredibly easy. There's no friction, there's no challenge, you're not forced to grapple with opposing arguments. But real critical thinking needs that friction. It needs exposure to different views. It needs us to question our own assumptions.
Like a muscle needing resistance to grow stronger.
Precisely. An echo chamber is like a cognitive gym with no weights. You won't build much intellectual muscle in there. Which leads to that crucial question. How can you truly understand any complex issue if you're only ever hearing one side of the story amplified back at you constantly?
You really can't. Which brings us back to that core dilemma. This deep human desire to fit in seems to have somehow overtaken the need for independent thought.
It's a powerful conflict.
But what is the actual cost of that trade-off? What do we lose when fitting in becomes the top priority?
The costs are profound, and they ripple outwards. First, you lose diversity of perspective. And that diversity is the lifeblood of innovation, of robust problem solving. When everyone thinks alike or feels pressured to think alike, you lose nuance, creativity, the ability to see blind spots.
Collective blind spots.
Exactly. Second, there's an erosion of individual agency, of authenticity. If you're constantly prioritizing external validation over your own internal compass, your own critical judgment, you start to lose touch with what you genuinely think and believe.
You become a reflection of the group.
To some extent, yes. And finally, society as a whole misses out. It misses potential breakthroughs, fresh ideas, the vigorous debates that sharpen understanding, the innovative solutions that often come from thinking differently. When conformity wins, progress stalls. And this isn't just abstract stuff. This lack of deep thinking has real, tangible, sometimes devastating consequences.
Right. These aren't just philosophical concerns. They hit us where we live. When a society collectively dials down deep thinking, you see this trifecta of problems. Innovation dries up, decision-making gets worse across the board, and individuality fades.
It's a cascade.
It really is. And you can spot these things playing out if you look closely in business, in politics, even in our communities.
Let's dig into those costs a bit. Innovation stagnation that happens because shallow thinking keeps you stuck in the present or even the past. You don't see novel solutions, you don't anticipate future shifts, you don't break new ground, you just react or tweak what already exists.
Like companies missing the next big thing.
Exactly. They're focused on optimizing the current model, not envisioning a totally new one. Then, poor decision-making. This crops up everywhere. Personal finance choices based on hype, not research. National policies driven by short-term political gains, not long-term well-being.
Kicking the can down the road.
Constantly. Decisions become short-sighted, based on incomplete data, or driven by immediate rewards, ignoring the long-term consequences. Think about environmental policy versus immediate economic concerns, for example.
A classic tension.
And finally, that erosion of individuality. When independent thought is discouraged, conformity spreads. Unique talents, unconventional perspectives, original ideas, they struggle to emerge. Society becomes less vibrant, less creative, less able to adapt and correct itself.
It's like a societal brain drain.
That's a good way to put it. A reduction in our collective capacity for complex thought. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these aren't just isolated mistakes. They're symptoms of a deeper cognitive deficit operating at scale, like neglecting critical infrastructure until it fails.
And we see these failures playing out in very real-world settings. The sources we looked at were full of examples. Uninformed business decisions leading to huge losses, even company collapse. Governments failing to tackle major issues because they're stuck in short-term cycles.
It's stark when you look at specifics. In business, think about companies clinging to old models while new ones disrupt them. Blockbuster versus Netflix is the go-to example, but there are countless others. It's often a failure of deep strategic thinking and inability to challenge their own successful past and envision a different future.
They couldn't think outside their own box.
Precisely. And in government, decisions driven by the next election cycle rather than the next generation's needs lead to things like crumbling infrastructure, unaddressed social inequalities, environmental problems that just keep getting worse because the long-term view is sacrificed for short-term political gain.
Like prioritizing development now over sustainable planning for the future.
Exactly. These aren't just random errors. They are often the predictable outcomes when deep, nuanced, long-term thinking isn't part of the process, when second and third order effects aren't considered.
Which brings us to those really big, challenging questions the sources raised. Could this widespread failure to think deeply, to think long-term, be a major contributing factor to massive global challenges, like climate change denial or recurring financial crises?
It's a provocative but crucial link to consider.
These aren't definite answers, obviously, but they're powerful invitations to think harder.
Absolutely. Take climate change. How does shallow thinking play in? Well, there's the focus on immediate economic costs versus long-term environmental devastation. There's the difficulty many have processing complex scientific models. It's easier to dismiss them than to grapple with them. And there's a resistance to considering severe long-term consequences if it means uncomfortable changes now.
Immediate pain versus future catastrophe.
It's a hard trade-off for minds focused on the short term. Similarly, financial crises often involve a laser focus on short-term profits, ignoring systemic risks building up in the background. A failure to critically assess complex financial products, maybe because they're opaque or just because everyone else seems to be doing okay with them.
Until they're not.
Until the whole thing unravels. Our sources strongly suggest these aren't just policy failures. They are, at a fundamental level, cognitive failures. Failures in risk assessment, in forecasting, in synthesizing complex, interconnected information. Which really begs the question, what other huge challenges are we failing to address properly because we're not engaging with their complexity deeply enough?
That's the sobering picture. But, and this is crucial, it's not the end of the story. The sources were also clear on this.
There's an antidote.
Exactly. While the problem is widespread, the solution actually lies within each of us. It starts with consciously choosing to question things, to think critically, to reflect on our choices big and small. This isn't some fixed state we're doomed to. Thinking is a skill.
A cognitive muscle.
Right. And like any muscle, it can be strengthened. It can be recultivated with practice.
That's such an important point. Thinking isn't magic, it's a practice. It's a choice we make, ideally many times a day. And the steps to re-engage aren't wildly complicated, though they do take discipline.
Like what?
It's about nurturing curiosity, asking why more often.
Mhm.
It's about cultivating genuine open-mindedness, being willing to actually consider perspectives that challenge you, even if they make you uncomfortable.
Leaning into the discomfort.
Yes, and maybe most importantly, being willing to be wrong. Being able to say, maybe my assumption was flawed, and changing your mind based on evidence. Real intellectual growth comes from refining your process of thinking, not just defending your current conclusions.
So the antidote isn't some secret formula.
No, it's a commitment to fundamental cognitive habits anyone can work on.
Okay, so here's the call to action then, something practical for everyone listening. Next time you're faced with a quick decision, could be something you read online, how to reply to someone, a choice at work, anything, just pause.
Take a breath.
Take a breath and actually think for a second. Ask yourself, am I just taking the easy route here, the thoughtless path? Or am I really engaging with this, considering the nuances, making a conscious choice?
Even on the small stuff.
Especially on the small stuff. Implementing that pause, making it a habit can be incredibly powerful. It's how you start reclaiming that thoughtful action. We hope this deep dive acts as a catalyst for you to do just that.
Absolutely.
And here's a final thought to maybe chew on, something that came up between us as we prepped. If this ability to think deeply, to analyze, synthesize, innovate, if that's truly one of humanity's greatest strengths,
For superpower almost.
right, what could we unlock if we collectively decided to reclaim and strengthen that power? What new knowledge, what solutions to huge problems, what unimagined possibilities might emerge?
It's a powerful question to sit with. The potential is enormous.
It really is. So
Yeah.
we really encourage you, keep this journey going, keep questioning, keep exploring. There are tons of great resources out there to help you hone your critical thinking.
Books on cognitive biases are fascinating. They show you the mental shortcuts we all take.
Totally. Or podcasts that do deep dives like this. Even just journaling, writing out your thoughts, reflecting on decisions can be incredibly effective.
Simple tools, big impact.
This conversation is just a starting point for your own intellectual journey. So please, keep questioning, keep exploring, and above all, keep thinking.